Oh, hey, Alex. Listen, I have something to tell you. I love you.
I love you too. And with that,
I
welcome
knew
to
it.
this with that, welcome to this week's episode of the 800's. I am your host, Alex, and you just heard from my loving co-host, Adam. Welcome everybody, especially to all you newcomers out there looking at you. Gamma, thanks for coming through, man. And Sofia Hahn Books, who actually happens to be the author of the book we're reading today. And also, quick shout out, thanks for the follow, Short Asian Girl '06, wherever you are out there in the world.
Yeah. So a couple of quick plugs for you guys, real quick here. If you joined us before our beautiful faces blessed the screen, you heard some music that was Fearless First from Incompetech. You should check out all of their music because they are awesome, and you can check it out at incompetech.filmmusic.io. Also, we post all of these videos as well as some other things such as our D&D podcast on our YouTube channel. The link is below the video. You should check that out. It's just DM's table at YouTube. And we have a Patreon. Link is also below the video. Patreon, just $2, gets you the ability to vote on our bi-weekly book vote for what we're going to be reading next. So if that's something that interests you, check out the Patreon link. Join us, give us $2, and you can tell us what to do. And finally, if you're like me and like audiobooks, I highly suggest checking out Audible. dmstable.com/audible will get you a 1 month free subscription and a free book to listen to while you have your free subscription. And it'll also, pad our pockets a little bit. So check that link out too.
It keeps the lights on.
Yeah.
All right, this week on the 800s, we'll be discussing our first ever romance novel, just in time for Valentine's Day, entitled Always Have, Always Will by Sofia Hahn. Welcome, Sofia Hahn. Anyways, Rose City, the city of romance, is beset by the evil supervillain the Plaguer, master of the undead and dark magics. Luckily, Rose City is protected by superheroes, led by Lady Katrina and the Rogue of Roses. Beneath the mask of these supers, however, are two teens who, unbeknownst to each other, are in love. Just as their high school years come to a close, tragedy strikes, and the lovelorn pair go their separate ways. 10 years later, they reunite. Will their love have a second chance, or will evil tear their love asunder once more?
Yes, those are very good questions, which we will find out. Well, actually, we already all found out because we already read the book.
We'll discuss, for sure.
We'll discuss the finding of out. If this is your guys' first time joining us, I'll give you a quick rundown of how this show works. Alex and I will look at the comment section for topic ideas, either in the form of a generic topic or a question that you would like to discuss. So if you have anything about the book that you would like to discuss, feel free to put that in the chat at any time. Alex and I will keep an eye out for it and remember to bring it up when there's a pause in the discussion. If there are no topics in the chat, then Alex and I will just stare lovingly into each other's eyes for long periods of silence. I'm just kidding. We'll come up with our own topics and talk about those instead. But what makes the show fun is viewer participation. So don't be shy. Put your comments, questions, topics, concerns, all the above in the chat section, and we'll have a good time.
And as always, just a little quick disclaimer before we get started. This is a show that is geared towards adults. We do cover adult themes and topics, very much so in this book. So bring kids in only at your discretion. We do also try not to rely too much on swearing or anything, but it happens. Also, we're trying to create a fun and supportive community where people can just share all of their interests without any fear of judgment or anything like that. So just to sum it all up, be nice or just fuck off.
Love the emphasis. With that, let's get the discussion started. Always have, always will. What were your first impressions on the novel?
All right. As usual, I'll start us off while Adam throws that up on our little chat banner. So my first impressions were I wasn't expecting it to start off in like teenage years. And so it threw me a bit for a loop there. But as I read it, I started picking up on some pretty typical stuff that I think I probably pretty heavily associate with like these typical romance novels, even though it was in teen years. There are also some sources of inspiration that I picked up on. In particular, there was a lot. I think a lot of inspiration was drawn from like a particular show called The Miraculous Ladybug. There's a lot of parallels there, and one of the things that I found interesting about that is the choice to go with a more anime style superhero than a traditional like Western style superhero, which, considering the fact that it's set in a more Western part of the world, was, makes it at least relatively unique as far as superheroes go. So I thought that was a pretty interesting choice, and I found myself drawn in by it, honestly.
Yeah, for me, I'm a big fan of the story style of like a flashback or previous villain, if you will, for the hero or heroine to fight, vanquish, and then the real story starts after that. I think it's a good way to introduce the particular style of the story, as well as some background knowledge about how things are going to work in the story, without having to, go through the I forget what it's called, like the dumb guy explanation thing, where you find a dumb guy and explain everything to him. But yeah, so I'm a big fan of that style. I did think this particular example ran a little long. It was about 60 pages, I think, if my memory serves, before we jumped forward to the main story. But it was an enticing way to start the novel. Very hooking. Yes, Watson. Thank you, V.S. Drake.
Yeah,
classic example of Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Watson needs everything explained to him.
Yeah, explanation to the incompetent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that like it was a good way to get started for a story that, like, especially I think it set the tone for getting a lot of basic foundation laid, as V.S. Drake said, so that you can go forward with something with romance as the main genre. I think we've had books where romance was a part of it. I think probably the best example of that was Snowflower and the Secret Fan. But because romance was only a part of it and not like the main part of the genre, it doesn't necessarily require you to put down as much foundation, because you can build the world as you go. And this required a bit more of that, so you can focus on the romance without having essentially two-dimensional characters on the page. So I thought that was done pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. Obviously, as you kind of already said, we're no romance experts. That should almost be a disclaimer on this. Sci-fi and fantasy are our realms of expertise, so romance is kind of leading out there.
Yeah, we are not the target demographic for this by any means, but I honestly thought it was a fun way to like step outside of our comfort zone. And as V.S. Drake said, I was also taken in by Sophia's control over imagery, and I'm going to talk about that a lot tonight, because personally, I think that was probably my favorite part of reading this book, was the imagery and the power that was behind it, especially to start things off, because it sets a tone for the world that you're in when you have an author that can really bring you into a scene. especially action scenes, I think are really easily over or underdone, and I didn't feel like there was too much of either in this. I mean, I might have wanted a little more, a little less out of something, but it's fairly nitpicky. In general, though, there wasn't like a trend towards overdoing a fight scene or underdoing it to the point where I'm like, why did that happen? So
yeah, I will say like the flight from the dance to the billionaire's house, that seemed a little rushed. I would have liked more there, but it definitely wasn't. There wasn't any scene where I was like, all right, get to the point. Which is good, because a lot of authors do tend to drag on for those.
Yeah, and not only do they tend to drag on, but they tend to use it as a bit of a crutch to like fill pages or to distract from other things that are going on, rather than using it to facilitate the story. And you actually brought up a good example, and I think it's the flight to, I believe it's the why am I blanking on this? I feel so bad.
House.
Rhett's house, but the van something. Why am I blanking on it? I literally just re-upped.
The Van Camp? I didn't bring the book down with me. I can't look.
But I want to go quickly to chat. VS Drake has a good question for the Van Camp Tower. So VS Drake has a good question that I want to pose to everybody here who read, but for those of you who aren't in the target demo of the romance novel, what do you expect out of romance novels, and what did you experience based on what you read? And even for those of you who haven't read, what are some tropes that you think of when you associate them with romance novels? And maybe we can discuss those. So feel free to throw those in chat as well.
Yeah, so to answer your question there, Alex and VS Drake, obviously, like I already said, this is outside of my norm. I have read a romance novel or two in the past, but nothing that like I picked up like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want to read. Like it was more of a, my wife was reading it and I was like, what you reading? All right, I'll check it out. But like the one thing I expected from a romance novel was yes, VS Drake, I've read Twilight. Is kind of like the cringy teenager stuff. I think there was some of that in this book as well, but not slap you in the face with it heavy with teenage cringe.
Oh yeah, there's definitely some teen angst in there for sure.
I think what I was reading into with this novel was you were definitely supposed to get the angst feeling to help you to make you feel compelled to continue the story. Kind of like the cliffhanger effect, but with angst. I think that was present throughout the book, in terms of all the missed opportunities between the two lovers and the potentials that were lost from unfortunate circumstances. So I was definitely expecting the teen angst, teen love stuff, and yeah. I thought I had more, but that's it.
I wasn't initially expecting that, because like when I think about like traditional, like especially when you get into like the like hot and heavy smutty types of romance novels, I don't typically think of teens, just because when things get hot and heavy, it gets a little weird. so with at least that kind of a romance novel anyway, I'm sure there's lots of books out there that do that, but they're like, they just turned 18 or something like that. Still can be a little weird. But anyways, I wasn't expecting high school initially, but those books do draw a lot from tension. And tension building is really what keeps them moving, what allows romance to be the primary genre, because I think it's really easy for romance to just be kind of an aspect of another genre. And for it to come to the forefront, I think that tension is necessary. And that's one thing I think that I'm going to be bringing this up a lot, the imagery helped with, is that it was intense enough to bring that to the forefront, to bring that angst to the forefront of our minds as we're going through this. And I think there was a pretty decent job done of interweaving that angst with the tension that you would naturally get from like a superhero fight scene, and kind of like melding those together and allowing the story to move forward. It does get caught up in itself sometimes. There are some other typical tropes that are in there, like the I love you, but I can't be with you because there's something else going on. Or I think the one that gets the most frustrating for me, but again, this builds to tension, so it's probably very intentional. If we just talked about it, we could solve it, but we're not going to talk with each other about this. And that gets me every time. This isn't just in this book. This is in any media where it's just like, if you sat down and had like maybe a 30-minute conversation with each other without interrupting and just laid it on the table, you could solve this. And that is true. Pack Phantom, I do agree. It can be a little frustrating when that's used as like the sole reason for a conflict. No, I appreciate you putting it in chat, Alpac. Even if you didn't read, like any time that like people feel like contributing, if you feel like you have something to throw in there, please do, as long as you're respectful about it. But that's a good point.
Especially when we're just talking about book theory and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a reader, you're a reader, and there's always stuff that's going to kind of permeate reading books, literature. And what do you think about what Alpac Phantom said, though, Adam?
So it is definitely a trope that gets used a lot in terms of lack of communication. I think you can build a conflict off of it, but it is not necessarily a satisfying conflict for me personally. I would like it to be used as a tool to build a different conflict, such as, I'm trying to think of a good example here.
Like from this book or in general?
From this book.
Well, I thought I have one if you don't.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I thought this tension, this split was meant to lead to the conflict that gives Nguyen Vanderbilt, the main antagonist, mean girl, a place to insert herself. It was, I don't think that in particular was the most gracefully done, because again, it felt a little obvious where they could have just said, oh, well, insert like most basic explanation here. Yes, that one, Bic. Bic, I really don't know how to pronounce it. I should know, but
pretty sure it's just like the swear word according to the
book.
According to the book.
No, according to the book, that is the mispronunciation that pissed her off the most. Is people is teasing her about the pronunciation when it wasn't pronounced that way.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, and that Alpac Phantom is part of the issue, is that this goes on for so long in this book, and there's multiple chances for them to resolve it, but they don't. And again, I know that is something that is pretty typical in these romance novels, for that to like almost say it, but then something or someone interrupts them. Or I think the most frustrating though is when they shut themselves down about it because of the overthinking. And I it's hard to tell if that frustration is just like, is that lazy writing or is that the intent? Because if I examine my own life, there's been so many times where I've explained away saying something to somebody realistically. I'd like to think that I wouldn't do that in those situations, but if I was in that situation, would I really? Or would I overthink it? Like I pretty prototypically do, and I had to put myself in that mindset, which does take me out of the story a little bit, but I don't know if that's just because I've become as analytical as I am about these books because of this show, or if that's, a general experience for other people.
Yeah, I will say, like, for me, my biggest gripe about this particular trope in this book was that it was reused after resolved the first time. So, right, the two main characters both had feelings for each other, didn't express it until 10 years in the future / present time. And then they got together. They said, yeah, by the way, I have feelings for you. And then it happens again where they don't talk to each other because what's her name ends up pregnant. And
Kitty, yeah.
Yep, Kitty ends up pregnant and could have just talked it out and it would have been fine. They would have figured it out, but they didn't. So, like, on one hand, that shows, consistency in character. But on the other hand, I would have liked to seen growth in character, that they overcome that communication.
Perfectly spoken. I was waiting to like see if you brought it up or not, but that line between character growth and character consistency is so hard to navigate, and I think, at least for me, it was a little bit off because of just how profound that was supposed to be, them coming together after 10 years. And you'd think that they would at least have tried to learn from that, where they opened up to each other, but the other thing that I do have to give to the consistency side is that you're talking about characters that basically went back to the place that they were 10 years prior. That means they have characteristics that are strong, consistent, that stick around for 10 years. So again, like, there's elements that play in there to both sides of the argument, and it's hard, and I think it just comes down to a matter of like what's more satisfying to you, and maybe we're not the target demographic for that particular set of characteristics or circumstances. But I would have liked to have seen a little more character growth and maybe had more circumstantial stuff come in, rather than I'm just not going to talk about it. Get out of my house.
Yeah.
So let's get into chat a little bit here. Looks like B.S. Drake was surprised by the level of graphicness in the sex scenes, having never read a romance novel, being as vivid as they were. A fight scene. What did you think about that, Adam?
Yeah, that I will say, in terms of writing, I think the graphicness of the romance scenes were really well written. I think it did catch me a little off guard. I was glad I was at home when I was reading it. I feel like if I was in public, I'd have been like, okay, I gotta put it down now.
if anything, I think that lends credence to just how well written the imagery is in this book. Though, if you had that feeling when you were out in public with this kind of book, Fia Drake had to hold their pearls. Oh Lord.
Oh no. Well, anyway. Yeah,
but I would tend to agree though. But like I think that's something that I did expect from this kind of book. Honestly, I was a little surprised at how long it took to get there because it seemed, because it started out as teenage years. I'm like, oh, so I'm not going to see a lot of this because it's teenage years. It's going to be all that pent up romance with no finish, except maybe making out or something. But no, cut to 10 years later and. Oh boy, did it get hot and heavy.
Via Strike asks, what else did you guys not expect and was there, or expect and wasn't there? Anything for that one there?
Let's see. I want to try and address the. Oh, I wasn't expecting to see that, the hashtag Pound Town. Okay. I didn't expect that one. But I want to try and think of. I want to try and address something that I expected to be there that wasn't. And for a romance novel, I guess I was expecting a little bit more of a little bit more of a fight from the not fight from the antagonist, but a little bit more of the reason why they're not together being because of the antagonist, and the antagonist was more a means to an end for the pregnancy, which was what kept them apart, because I'm used to like this did, and I'll actually play into the other half of this. There was that trope where when they are apart, there's they get together, but then they break up and then they get back together. Like that's in every rom-com that's ever been made ever. There's something that, but that's also just kind of a part of how these romances go, because there has to be a test to the romance at some point. I just expected that to come from a more outside source rather than like the internal conflict, just because I've only read 2 other like actual romance novels like this one, and one of them was on accident. and the other was one that it had a dragon on the cover, and I didn't know any better.
I'm just imagining one of those terrible TikToks where like somebody slips on their keys and goes to McDonald's or something. Oh no, I accidentally read this book.
Well, I didn't know it was a romance novel, and then when I got into it, it wasn't like I kept slipping into the pages. I kept on reading. And the other one that I read was helping somebody edit like a short. It wasn't even a novel. It was like a novella short story. It was like 50 pages long. So I had some experience coming into this expecting some of that stuff, but okay, yeah, maybe not with the step novel there via strike. So I had some expectations, but not really a lot to have that weren't there. I just have those 2 experiences and then stereotypes, so that's really all I had as far as that goes.
Yeah, for me, so when the novel started and the superhero powers were explained and the little spirit guys that all the superheroes have was kind of vetted a little bit, I was expecting more in terms of lore for the superpowers, how they came about, exactly how they work, what all the other types are. It sounded like Hahn had a lot of lore planned out ahead of time in terms of writing this novel, and I would have liked to see more in terms of that. But again, that's probably more because sci-fi fantasy is my realm.
That's actually a really good point. I did have more expectations, I think, of the superhero part than I did of the romance part, and that's actually probably the biggest thing I had an expectation of that we didn't get a lot of. I think what V.S. Drake is getting there is the yokai. I happen to know a little bit about this stuff, so I can fill in the gaps without needing more necessarily. But I think that is where you start riding that line between, is this a superhero book with romance, or is it a romance book about supers? And that's a tough one to get around. I think there was a good amount of exposition about the powers, just enough to know where they come from, to know it appeared mysteriously that they come from these yokai that give them the powers, and they feed off the soul energy. So you have a source of the powers themselves, you have a source of the energy behind the powers, and you have an approximate origin of them being from somewhere in the Far East. And if you get too much into the bogged down in the details of that world building, I think you start slipping into a superhero book that happens to have a romance in it. I mean, I don't know too many superhero books that would have the kind of, hot and heavy sex scenes that this one did. That might be the other thing that tilts it in the other direction, but who knows? This is only book 1 of 2. Maybe book 2 will have a little bit more on that. There are plenty of books that do that, where they just give you a little bit to begin with, and they draw you in with that mystery of, oh, I want to know more about this specific aspect of the book. And, they draw you in with the lore without necessarily laying it all out. We get a lot of that in fantasy, where it's just laid out for us because it's a part of the world building, because they're planning to expand on that to a massive extent. We're talking about, we've talked about magic systems that can get pretty incredibly complicated, but for simple magic systems, there might not be all that much more that we need to necessarily know, or maybe the mystery is a part of it. Maybe that's a part of the tension that we're supposed to feel. I will agree, V.S. Drake, what Laura was given was great. I mean, that I like it because I'm really into anime stuff, so having that kind of anime feel for the superheroes was fun. I actually kind of want to put this out there. What did you think of the yokai as characters in these books themselves?
The yokai were the characters that gave the powers.
Yeah.
The soul beings. Okay. So for me, I enjoyed the concept. Kind of thrown back to mention similarities between this and the Miraculous Ladybug show. Kind of similar there, but more internalized.
Yeah,
which was kind of interesting. I liked that there was a kind of dynamic, especially with Kitty and I'm really bad with names. Her soul character. You kind of got the impression that they were friendly towards each other and understood that they're working together, but they need their space. Just because their souls are intertwined doesn't mean that they can't have alone time. There's one specific scene I'm thinking of where there's a specific signal that Kitty can do, I think touching the back of her head or something, that indicated that she didn't want Kasha, thank you, V.S. Drake, to talk to her that night, and she just wanted to be alone with her thoughts for a bit. That's something that you don't see a lot with the intertwined souls kind of magic system. Is usually the intertwined souls thing is oh, we're BFFs forever, and that's it. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially also the period where Kitty had the rogues soul character thing.
Kitsune.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fox.
Yep. And she was essentially like, "Don't fucking talk, leave me alone. I'll keep you alive, but we're not friends."
Yeah, I like what VS Drake said here. It would have been kind of cool to see a little bit more of like the spirits as like kind of a side character conversation. The one thing that's tricky about that, though, in the context of a book as opposed to like say a TV or show, is there's no way to like cut to them alone without disrupting the flow of the book in a way that is a lot harder to do on text than it is to do like visually speaking. You know, especially if you think like graphic novels, even if we're going to keep it on like on paper, in graphic novels, when you cut away, there's still that aspect of everything going around those panels that you can draw from to keep you in the moment with those characters. Whereas in literature, you'd have to like be like cut to these two talking on their own and then cutting back in, and it's a lot harder to do without disrupting flow. But yeah, it would have been nice because that I think would have added some depth to the disjointed communication between these two. It kind of got thrown in at the end there a little bit that they were like the machinists behind some of this, and that was a little bit tough to parse together like where necessarily they did, and I wanted to know where. But again, there's a lot to be said for leaving it out as much as there is the curiosity about bringing it into the story.
Yeah, I think what VS Drake is really hitting on here is the show don't tell ideal.
Yeah, that's a good point in general.
But I mean, I'd say what I understood here is the main focus the author wanted to get across was the romance and the things preventing the romance in terms of like direct physical prevention, where I feel like the spirit peeps were more indirect. They were more like, we don't care if you guys fall in love, but like you're not going to find out each other's identity.
Yeah, and that's where VS Drake, I don't know that point necessarily works, like saying for some reason Kitty felt like she couldn't speak their mind. Like Sofia Hahn made a pretty big point about saying that like these characters don't meddle in that directly. It was a lot more of what information do we have and what are we going to give them or not give them or even directly lie about, and well, yeah, so it's less like they actually will keep them from thinking things or saying things, and more so they may or may not throw in misinformation or allow them to believe things that they could very easily dismiss. And there's a lot of places where that could have happened. We know some very obvious ones, but it makes those characters particularly mischievous. I will say though, I did personally enjoy Kitsune quite a bit because there are a lot of times where I'm like, that dude's saying what I'm thinking. I'm like, why don't you just talk with each other? He says that like 20 separate times and they just don't. And
yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand with the trope of, well, I just can't talk to him because reasons that are only valid until I talk to them, and then I'm like, oh, actually, it was fine.
I mean, a lot of it gets cropped to like insecurities, and those are well established from the very beginning. Insecurities, which I applaud her for like having that consistency, but at the same time, we talked about this before, character growth. Thank you, V.S. Drake. I actually did want to pivot to something a little more focused on the actual romance of this. What did you think? What did you think of the idea of the love triangle between only two people? Yeah.
Love triangle between two people. Yeah. I had a hard time feeling like it really was a triangle or a square even. Just because like the entirety of the book, Rhett had an inkling that Kitty was Lady Katrina, was it?
Yeah.
Katarina? What however you say it. He thought that Kitty was the superheroine, and I feel like that kind of made it feel more one-on-one versus one-on-one potentially. So for me, it really didn't feel like a love triangle. It felt more just like a added layer of complication that helped with the miscommunication issue that was going on.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to think of that as a love triangle when one of the characters has an idea, like even if he doesn't act on it via Drake, like you mentioned, I think it honestly becomes more of the will he figure it out and less of a will they won't they, who will it be? Because especially after why am I blanking on the one who in the future, the one who casts the spell that makes that makes the orgy erupt all over the place?
Witchcraft.
Yeah, witchcraft. When witchcraft casts that when witchcraft casts that spell, there's a lot more for me tension about will he figure it out, because it establishes specifically at that moment that it only works on soulmates specifically. And it felt like that was going to be enough to push them over the edge if he would just talk to her, and he doesn't. And that's like the only reason why that didn't happen. And so it started to feel a little less like a triangle and more of a like, when will these people get out of their own damn way? The triangle element that got thrown in there really only happens when we figure out, that Chasm and Kitty hooked up like 3 years prior to the present day. Yeah. And then they meet at the concert, and I thought there might have been the potential for that to wind up causing a little more discord, and that's actually more what I was expecting to cause the discord, even more so than just them not speaking, especially because as we've talked about, that happened once already, so you'd think that it would resolve a little quicker. But, when you deal with characters that are as set in their ways as this, it's hard to know where the line is for them. But I don't know. There's a lot of frustration on my end as a reader with those characters throughout the book for that reason, because it was a lot of just get out of your own goddamn way. Like, if you love each other that much, but maybe that's the point, and we're just not the best at getting it.
That could be, again, not our typical strong suit here.
Yeah, we're still learning, so feel free to chime in and let us know if you read more of these books. Man. Right. So is anybody, let us know if you have any other questions that you'd like us to answer. For now, though, I would like to talk about the main romance. What did you think about the fit of the two people who were supposed to be in love? Like the romantic fit.
Good question. So for my take on the romance of the story, I would have liked to see more about the why behind the love. Like, why does Kitty feel so strongly that Rhett is the one and only one? You know, why does Rhett hold on to his feelings for Kitty throughout the decade that they're apart? You know, it's mentioned a couple of times that Rhett dated several people in the 10-year frame, but something always kept that flame alive in his heart for Kitty. I would have liked to know, as the reader, more in depth about what drew each character to each other, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. I kind of had the same thought. I mean, a lot of it is, I feel like, is attempted to be explained by the idea of a soulmate, but I think that was glossed over a little bit as to how the author and in this book soulmate defined a soulmate. Because I think there's different definitions out there for different people, and if it's this idea that there is this inextricable link between two people that is always going to pull them together, that defies all reason, that's fine, but it would be nice to know that that's the definition for sure, and not like there are other things there. I mean, they talk about them being like handsome and smart and, you know, clever, but that they're nice and smell good and kind. There's a little bit of that, but I don't know. It felt a little bit left to the wayside for as important of a relationship as it was. Like, there could have used a little more depth on that for me as well. You know, just because, you know, if it is that profound, as you said, Adam, to last 10 years, especially after, you know, blaming themselves about for what went on the entire time, there has to be something bigger there, you know, and knowing what and what it is and how it's affecting them through that time would have been nice.
Yeah, I would assume because they were both chosen to be superheroes and are pure of heart, that they probably make a good fit for each other.
Yeah, I think that is the general premise, though. But again, it just, as you said, it would have been nice to have a little bit more of depth to that. But I think it's easy enough to see why, but not the why of why. You know, you want just a little bit more there. V.S. Draco has a kind of a hot take on this, that they thought it was a slightly toxic relationship.
I'm catching up here.
Toxic in the ways that they, I'm not sure what you mean by discoordinate, in a way that makes two people spiral. I think spending more time in the teen years to build that love could have sold that strong relationship. Okay, so I think what you're getting at is that it's toxic because of the way that they treat each other when they miscommunicate, and a little bit. I mean, like, there's the jealousy element that you get from Rhett that a lot of times is just like, dude, chill. Like, you haven't been together for that long. I get you've loved each other for that long, but like, give it some air to breathe, man. And like, especially when you're the one who walked away and didn't even have the decency to talk to her about it. You literally slept with her and then the next morning said, get the fuck out, in like the most dickish way possible. And yeah, that doesn't bode well. I also thought it was a little fast how they forgave each other for it without actually like fully apologizing for it, or at least not as thoroughly as I would think, considering how traumatic that was. Like, that lasted for months. It happens relatively quickly in the book, but that lasted for months. And it's just over like that. And I know that's part of the romance of the scenario, but at the same time, it's just like, as a reader, I want a little more, especially for Kitty, I wanted a little more vindication and talking about that, or vindication is probably the wrong word, but a little bit more talking about, or the reconciliation rather than it just happening.
Yeah,
Catharsis is probably closer via Drake. Thank you.
I would have liked to see some more of each of them building each other up in the relationship. Like, what do they do for each other to help each other become better people? You know, what I would describe as a toxic relationship is one where you either permit toxic behavior or promote it, or prevent change in a person because you're either holding them back or holding them up to a standard that they feel like they have to meet. Those are all things that I would think would define a toxic relationship that isn't straight up like abuse.
Yeah.
And I don't think, except for the obvious mentioned breakup snap that you were talking about, I don't think any of that kind of stuff was there per se, but we didn't see anything in terms of building each other up either. So,
well, I thought there was a little bit of holding up to standards for each other, just like, you know, putting them on the pedestal to a certain extent, and ultimately that came back to be toxic on themselves. Like, it was a little different because it wasn't toxic towards the other person. It was this person is on this pedestal, so they couldn't possibly understand where I'm at because I'm unworthy of them being on this pedestal. And that causes a lot of miscommunication. That's why that's why Kitty doesn't tell Rhett that she's pregnant, is because she's afraid of what he'll think of her. Whereas opposed to building each other up should be, I trust you enough to be able to communicate anything. You get me type of scenario. And it would have been nice to see a little bit more of that. I agree, Adam. That's a really good point. But as you said, these two being chosen, like the idea of like love being a fated thing, that's actually something I thought was really interestingly handled, is that it is treated as fate as soulmates. But I really like towards the end that note from Chasm. When she's speaking with Kaz about how love is a choice, and that you can choose to give your love to somebody. You don't always choose who you love, but you can choose to love somebody. But yeah, VS Drake, I get you too.
You got any other topics you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, that was some legit insight from Kaz. Yeah, that was really nice, honestly, at the end there. I know there was one other one that I wanted to go over. And I think
if you're thinking, I've got one.
Oh yeah, go ahead, throw it in.
So while we're talking about Chasm, what'd you think of Chasm?
Honestly, I thought he was a good foil to the other characters, really. There needed to be somebody with a very level-headedness in this cadre of characters, of superheroes, and that he just innately has. He knows who he is, he knows what he wants, and he is willing to let go to a certain willing and able to let go to a certain extent while also not giving up, which having him in there as more than just a wrench in the gears, as the third, I thought that was really smartly done. The fact that he was both an antagonistic character to Rhett, but also like a font of wisdom within this group was really nicely done. And yeah, I honestly enjoyed him as a character. Even the part where he winds up being the third, I thought it was pretty well handled, and I liked him as a character for the most part. A little full of himself, but kind of has reason to be.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the he's their foil bit. He's exactly what they weren't doing. He walked up and said, "Yo, I dig you. You wanna?" And even after all the years, he was like, "Still dig you. You wanna?" Which obviously never happened until it did.
It didn't happen until it did.
It didn't happen until it did. That was wow. Words are. I am so good at wording things. It's like magic coming from my lips. Obviously, it didn't happen for a very, very long time for the two main characters.
Well, and the other way in which I think he was a foil was, I think he was the best of the characters at owning his mistakes. Is he's like, yeah, I made this mistake. I'm owning it. I shouldn't have done that. I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did because I had to. And I don't regret that, but I do regret not doing more of something else. Is he just comes out and freaking says it, lays all the cards on the table, which is so nice. Oh, and thank you, Gamma, for the follow, by the way. Awesome.
Yeah, very
always
cool.
Nice to have another follower. Let's see here, and yeah, I just generally enjoyed him as a character, which actually kind of leads me into my question, unless you had more to throw in there.
No, go for it.
Who was your favorite? Let's say, I'll say this now because we've already talked about him. Aside from Kaz, who was your favorite non-hero trio character? Let's put it that way.
Hero trio character.
So side character that wasn't part of the trio.
Yeah.
Why?
Good question. I don't know. Who was yours?
Honestly, I think my favorite was probably Cece. Yep, Dia Strake's with me. It's all that character who was the stand by you no matter what type. I mean, you're not as loud or outgoing as her, but like I know that I've got a best friend like her in you, Adam. Who would always be there and who pushes me. We talk about somebody who pushes us to be better people. Like that was Cece for Kitty. Like that's the character, that really does it. Really does support her in that way, and we get a little bit of that from Emilio, her husband. But Cece's the one who really does it, and I think was my favorite. And this isn't technically a part of my question, but I always like to point out characters that are made to be characters that you love to hate. And, I think we all know who I'm talking about here. Just Nguyen Vanderbilt. Like when there's a character that you just is so vile that you just like want to drop kick him. Sorry, Alan. I love you too. But yeah, it's not, I always appreciate characters that evoke like very visceral reactions one way or the other. So like I appreciate her for what she was, but she can go fuck herself.
Yeah, Cece was definitely a good shoulder to cry on, so to speak. She, in terms of writing too, I think she was a great character for exposition about different things that Kitty was feeling but couldn't express in action. She moved the story along to get the lovers back together without it being something silly like, oh, I ran into you on the side of the road.
I also like how she wound up being the Sherlock Holmes, and Kitty ended up being the Watson several times too, which was kind of cool. Yeah, she absolutely was critical to the flow of the story. There's making that character a reporter, somebody whose job it is to put pieces together like that, is a good move. It makes sense that they would be involved in stuff. This book never felt dull after the high school years. Can you mind explaining that, VS Drake? I wanted to throw that. I want to be able to dissect that a little bit. Oh, it had good rhythm moving forward. Yes, it did. I did appreciate like the flow of the story of this. I actually thought that the flow was a little bit chunky at the beginning because there's a lot to be laid down. But like once it really hit its stride at the 10-year mark, especially, and kind of kept it throughout for the most part. I'm interested to see how that flow goes into the next book, honestly.
Do you have any more topics for discussion, or should we head into the wraps?
I think we can, unless somebody else in chat specifically has anything that they want to throw in, please, anybody feel free to do so. I more or less have covered like the main things that I wanted to. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover, or?
I think I'm ready for wrap up.
Well, why don't we do this while we give people a chance before we do like final thoughts? Is predictions for the next book. I think this is the first time we've done a predictions where nobody's read the next book because it doesn't exist yet.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Sofia Hahn probably has a good idea about what the next book has.
Yeah, true. No spoilers, Sofia Hahn.
Predictions. I think we'll see some more. I can't think of the word. Working with other superheroes.
So not more just yokai and superheroes.
I mean, like in this first one, the only time they teamed up, besides the Rogue and Lady Cat, was at the very end. So I think we'll see superhero team ups more in the second book. Obviously, we're probably gonna find out more about the man behind the curtain, so to speak, who's controlling things from afar.
I actually more or less agree with your predictions. I'm going to quickly highlight V.S. Drake's, though. They think it's going to be a straight up fast forward to when the daughter is older and maybe in teen years. So, like, we're on to the next generation of romance. I think, though, that, and maybe this is wishful thinking, and in part informed by the little blurb that we get at the very end of Sofia Hahn's first book, which if you do purchase her book, at the very end there's a little blurb that is like a passage from the next book. We are absolutely going to get more superhero team ups. I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on Chasm as maybe the next romantic lead, because we've already had our lovers found each other. I think there is going to be tension there, maybe brought about by the kid, but I think Chasm's going to get his shot, and maybe again that's wishful thinking because I liked him as a character and I want to see him get his. But I think we're going to get a lot more exposition as to the lore. Not a lot more, but I would say something significant about maybe where they come from or what their purpose is for being there, that sort of thing.
V.S. Drake.
V.S. Drake. Yeah, V.S. Drake with a hot take. Everyone's gonna die. Oh man.
V.S. Drake over here, like, I would like to see a character death. See some death in this romance novel.
I mean, we already did. It started out with death.
Oh, man.
I think my most bold prediction though is and maybe I really hope I didn't misread the book here, but I don't remember Rhett's mom actually, like, they say she died because she threw herself into the river. I don't know that body was necessarily recovered. If it was, I take this prediction back, but if she wasn't actually found, and I'm remembering this correctly, I think she's still out there.
Interesting. Maybe she's the man behind the curtain. All right, final thoughts. What you got?
All right. Well, I would say I actually found this book reasonably entertaining. I don't think I'm now necessarily like a fan of romance books as a whole, but it was compelling enough to keep me reading, and I never at any moment thought I don't want to be reading this. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to like everybody I know, but people who have who don't mind a little smut in their books, and people who enjoy romance with a little bit of angst and a little bit of frustration as the reader, I would absolutely recommend it as like a romance novel that has what I think is a pretty cool twist to it.
Yeah, it was. It's definitely had an interesting concept behind it. I liked the superhero stuff. The character cast was small, which I like too, because I hate when books just grow and grow and grow and grow, and I can never remember anybody's name, and I gotta assign them my own name because I'm like, character B was with character C. What the heck was their name?
This was a small cast, and we still had trouble remembering some things. So that's not on you, Sofia Hahn. That is on us. It definitely has been way worse.
Yeah, I would have liked to see more of the superhero stuff and more about the world behind the superheroes. And even if it was just like side adventures, I would have liked to see that. That would have really sold it to me. Yeah.
So I'm just laughing because like it would have sold it to you if it were a superhero book with romance and not a romance book with superheroes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is on us for being like that's just kind of our wheelhouse. But you know, honestly, it wasn't. I think a pretty enjoyable foray into the romance novel world. All in all, at least for me. And if it's not to your taste, that's fine. But heck, if you're this is something I would recommend to anybody who's open-minded enough to try a romance or who enjoys romance. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, if you enjoy the romance genre, definitely give Sofia Hahn your money and read her book.
Yeah, definitely go check Sofia Hahn out. She's got more. I know the second book is still on its way. She's got more that books that range from, your pretty typical modern day romance to Vikings and so on and so forth. So go ahead and check her out. But I think with that. Oh, and thank you, V.S. Drake. Yes, absolutely. There's some great writing in this book, and appreciate a lot of the imagery, and would love to see Sofia Hahn get more readers. So even if this isn't your deal, if you know somebody who it is, pass it on to her. We'll post more of her information. I believe she's at Sofia Hahn Books on both Twitter and Instagram. But for now, let's go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah. So next books. We got some next books to read. So for February 26th, we already know Children of Blood and Bone. That's still the plan. So get reading. You got 2 weeks. And 2 weeks after that, for March 12th, we're going to do The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I hope I have that right.
Yes, you do.
So yeah, that's some good stuff for the rest of February and March.
Yep, and just a reminder about our themes there for Children of Blood and Bone. That is going to be our Black Authors Week as a part of Black History Month, being in February, and then for Women's Month in March, that is where Sarah Penner hits the mark as our female author for that week. And our next theme for our upcoming vote is going to be debut books. That is debut books from authors we know and love, or debut authors themselves. So we will give you guys 1 day to give us your last recommendations. If you have any debut books or authors, just let us know. And we will throw them in. Otherwise, we do have enough from our previous list to make one. If need be, and then we are into April, which is actually the month in which National Book Day resides. So we're definitely going to be celebrating that one when that comes around on April 23rd.
But yeah, some shameless plugs for you guys. DMstable.com. That's where you can go to get all your info on this show and everything else we do. So go check out DMstable.com. Also, as I previously mentioned, we have a YouTube channel. Links below the video. Go check it out for some videos on the video website. Patreon, link down there too. DMstable on Patreon. That's how we pay the bills for our online drive and website and all that crap. So if you want to give us some dineros, that'd be appreciated. And if you want to reach out to us and talk to us in a more social scenario, a more socially media-centric thing, then you should check out Facebook and Twitter, which is where we are active the most. On Facebook, we're at The DMs Table, and Twitter, we're at DMs Table. And if you're like, oh my gosh, these guys are dope, I really want to be a part of their community. What voice? I'm not doing a voice. You hush. This is just my voice. If you want to talk to us and not hear our voice, because apparently it's like so horrible and grating, you should check out our Discord server. We can give you that link if you hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll talk to you on Discord. And on Discord, we talk about all sorts of things, not just books. We do talk about books on Discord, but we also talk about things like 3D printing, D&D, current nerd shows that are airing, stuff like that. So hit us up and you can join us.
Yep. And we're open to all nerdy or maybe even non-nerdy interests of any kind that you feel like sharing with us. So please hit us up there and, share whatever you like. Because again, this is that fun and supportive community we're trying to build. And also, again, just want to reiterate, please check out Sofia Hahn if you have any interest in romance novels. You can check her out on Amazon. That's Sofia Hahn, spelled SOFIAHAHN, and she is at Sofia Hahn Books on both Twitter and Instagram. She is most active on Instagram, as we recently found out. And special thanks to her for showing up for our stream. I know she wasn't really active in chat, but really do appreciate having her on the show. Also, another thing to consider if you're thinking about Patreon, we are looking to collaborate with her and any other authors that feel like collaborating with us. We'd love to talk with you about that, but look forward to some content where we will be collaborating with her, probably closer to a release of some of her works. And that stuff will be initially released to Patreon subscribers first, and only later released to the public. So just another reason to support us. That sweet content.
Thank you, Sophia, for joining us tonight and watching us talk about your book.
And thank you everybody else new who came this week. It was awesome to see so many people watching. This is probably the largest number of people we've had actively watching. I know our chat wasn't the most active, but we hope that you keep up with us or spread the word. Please spread it to anybody else you know who loves books, who might want to get in on this, and know that you don't have to read the books to come and join in. Elpac Phantom showed exactly how you can join without having read the book. So we're happy to have.
If we're doing some books that aren't quite your cup of tea, feel free to give us some suggestions about what would be your particular brew, and maybe that can make it up here one of these days, and we'll talk about your book.
Exactly. All right.
But yeah, thank you everybody for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you very much, and we will see you next book.
Yes, see you guys later. Yeah. Okay.